Castlevania, the games, the myths, the legends. You've probably heard of them. Maybe you've played as Simon and Richter Belmont in Smash Ultimate, whipping Kirby to the outer reaches of Popstar and dancing along to the head-banging tunes of Dracula's castle. It's enough to make a person sick. Sick with a desire for more. But there hasn't been a new Castlevania game in years. Quite a few years, in fact. Plus, there are more games than you can shake a miserable little pile of secrets at. Where do you even start? How does someone get into this storied series? That's what I'm here to answer. Because lucky for you, Konami has risen from the depths of self-imposed irrelevance to release a fair few collections that you can play on modern platforms. That's what I'm going to explore today. Modern platforms. I'm not interested in showing you the games that you can buy on eBay that may or may not work for a glorious price of £2,700. Get out of here with that nonsense. I'm going to tell you about the games you can buy right now on your Switch, PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Xbox Series S, Xbox Series X, and PC without having to jump through hoops. Ready? Then let's begin. Yeah, so this collection contains the very first games that made Castlevania a hit in homes across the world and is available on every modern platform. So let's explore. Castlevania is the first. The original, you might say, which launched on the NES back in 1986. This thing took the gothic horror of the Universal Studios Monsters lineup and slotted them into a blood-pumping, action-fueled romp through the castle of Count Dracula, Lord of Darkness. You progress through it in traditional stages, slowly making your way to the top of the castle. It stars Simon Belmont, part of a bloodline of vampire hunters that have sworn to defeat Dracula whenever he rises from the dead. And spoiler alert, he rises from the dead a lot. Along the way, Simon faces foes like Medusa, a couple of ancient Egyptian mummies, Frankenstein's monster, and of course, the legendary Count himself. You can whip candles to gain hearts, which act as ammo for your sub-weapons like holy water and cross boomerangs. But it's not easy. This is a hard game, extremely hard. The controls are stiff, there's knockback if you get hit by an enemy, which can send you flying into a bottomless pit, and you can't change the direction of your jump. If you start here, be prepared for merciless game design that only the 1980s can offer. But on the plus side, the music is stunning, and that can be said for pretty much every game in this video. Next up, we have Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest, which launched on the NES in 1987. This is actually a really bold, ambitious game. They abandoned the traditional level design of going stage by stage in favour of an open world, where you can explore to find the body parts of Dracula in order to break a deadly curse that was placed on Simon at the end of the last game. Some people don't like this one at all, others find it okay. Enemies just, well, they jump around and they drop hearts, which are used as currency to buy new equipment from townsfolk. That equipment allows you to progress further in your exploration, which gets you closer to each body part. Another point of contention, apart from abandoning traditional levels, is the transition from day to night and vice versa. When you're out in the world, the time of day can change and a message pops up that you can't skip. It's really annoying and disrupts the pacing, but if you can get over that, you might have a good time. Just bring a guide with you. You'll need it. Trust me. And now we move on to Castlevania 3 Dracula's Curse, which launched on the NES in 1989. Not to be confused with the curse placed on Simon in the previous game, this is about Trevor Belmont, ancestor of Simon. It's a prequel set a few hundred years before the first game and was intended to be the origin of the Belmont's feud with Dracula. In this story, he's ravaging the continent of Europe, and Trevor is on a mission to stop him with the help of a few allies. This game does let you play as those allies, but I won't spoil them for you. It can be quite fun to come across them and figure out how each of their abilities work. Castlevania 3 goes back to the level design of the first game, but this time, it's even harder. Yeah, you heard that right. Dracula's Curse is much harder than the first game, and you might just wonder if you can ever reach the end. Here's a tip. When you give yourself a name at the beginning, enter the code HELP ME. It will give you 10 lives instead of the usual 2. Very handy indeed, and there's no shame in it. And another cool bit of trivia, this is the game that the Netflix adaptation of Castlevania was based on. So that's cool. But what's this? A Castlevania game for the Game Boy that launched in the same year? Yeah, Castlevania The Adventure is the first handheld entry in the series, and it sucks. Okay, maybe it's not that bad, but it certainly doesn't have the cool level design of the NES games, and also has the annoying habit of getting rid of your whip upgrades if you take a single hit, which is not what happens in the originals. In terms of story, this is a sequel to Dracula's Curse and stars Christopher Belmont. Dracula's back, big surprise, and needs a good whipping. It did get a remake on the Wii called Castlevania The Adventure Rebirth, which is supposed to be much better, but I've never played it myself, and frankly you can't buy it anymore, which is a real shame. We're moving on to 1991 now, and we start with the next Game Boy entry, Castlevania 2 Belmont's Revenge. Set 15 years after the adventure, Dracula has kidnapped Christopher's son, turned him into a demon, and used his powers to come back in human form. Christopher heads off to take revenge, hence the title. This is a much better game than its predecessor. You can choose which level you want to do, much like Mega Man, and each level feels closer to the original NES games. There are also sub-weapons here, which were strangely missing from the first Game Boy title, but the fact that you can choose which order you want to play the levels in is fantastic, I think, and really surprised me. Belmont's Revenge is a marked improvement and is worthy of your time, in my opinion. But look at these glorious colours! That's right, we're on the SNES now, people. Say hello to Super Castlevania 4. Not Castlevania 4, not Super Castlevania, but Super Castlevania 4. With a title that nonsensical, you know it's got to be good. And it is. It really, really is. Super Castlevania 4 is many people's favourite classic style game in the series, and for good reason. It's a remake of Castlevania 1, telling a revamped story, see what I did there, of Simon Belmont's fight against Dracula for a new console generation. But along with a shiny new story, there are also shiny new controls. Simon can whip in a few different directions instead of just one, his movement is nowhere near as stiff, and he can adjust his jump while in midair. Also, he can use his whip as a swinging grappling hook. How cool is that? Plus, the visuals are a massive improvement thanks to the increased power of the 16-bit SNES. This game is awesome. I'd say that if you find Castlevania 1 too frustrating, move on to Super Castlevania 4 instead. It's a great remake and a great jumping on point for newcomers. We're moving on to the Sega Genesis now, and this had one game in total, Castlevania Bloodlines. Somehow it never received a re-release until this collection, but at least it happened, and it's also available on Nintendo Switch Online in the Sega Genesis app. Bloodlines is stylish as heck, and the goriest of the bunch. It's called Bloodlines because of the story, but there's certainly a lot of blood involved in more ways than just that. The game is structured like classic Castlevania, going from stage to stage, and there are sub-weapons as you would expect. The difference here is that you don't play as a Belmont, you have a choice between two characters, John Morris, who uses a whip, and Eric Lacard, who uses a spear. Both play a bit more fast-paced than other games in the series, which is nice. The story indicates that the Belmont clan disappeared hundreds of years ago, and that the Morris family have had to take up the mantle of vampire hunters. Because until now, it was only available to those who could pay exorbitant prices for a second-hand copy, it had a bit of a legendary status as an underrated gem. In my opinion, even now that it's had a wide re-release, I think it's great. So that's it, that's the Anniversary Collection. A rich, detailed history lesson of the early Castlevania days, and Kid Dracula is also here. Yep, this is a weird one. Kid Dracula is a genuine game that released in 1993 and is considered a spoof of the Castlevania series. It even contains remixed music. Overall, it's not a bad time. But that really is all of the games in the Anniversary Collection. There's no more. Overall, I'd say that if you're interested in the early history of gaming, this is a fantastic choice. It's worth it for Super Castlevania 4 alone, but you also get a ton of bonus features that go into how the games were created, concept art, all different things like that. Right, let's move on to what is arguably the most significant collection in this video, Castlevania Requiem, Symphony of the Night and Rondo of Blood, released in 2018 for the PS4. Just the PS4 unfortunately, which is a shame because these are two of the best games in the franchise. You can of course play them on the PS5 as well, but I really wish these would make their way to other platforms soon. But let's get to why these are so important. Castlevania Rondo of Blood is the first game here. Yes, the title of the collection puts Symphony of the Night first, but we'll get to why that is later. Rondo of Blood is our first stop, and what a stop it is. I said before that Super Castlevania 4 was many people's favourite classic style game in the series. There are many others who prefer Rondo of Blood, one of whom is yours truly. Rondo of Blood came out in 1993 for the PC Engine in Japan, and thus never received an English localization until much later. The soundtrack is my favourite of the series, and the sprite work is beautiful. However, the controls removed all the advancements that Super Castlevania 4 made, so you can no longer whip in different directions or adjust your jump in mid-air. But the game makes up for it with a world design that includes secret stages, hidden damsels in distress you can rescue, and cool anime cutscenes that play on rare occasions. The story is quite simple, as usual, but Richter Belmont is the most badass Belmont in the series, and it's no wonder they based the Netflix show Castlevania Nocturne around him. Just an awesome blood-pumping experience all round. It also serves as a direct prequel to Castlevania Symphony of the Night, which came out in 1997 for the PlayStation 1 and Sega Saturn. Ah, Symphony of the Night. This is the most well-regarded game in the series by far. This is the game people recommend above any other, and for good reason. It even invented the term Metroidvania. You see that word used all over the place now, but it started here. Symphony of the Night stars Alucard, son of Dracula, as he attempts to stop his father from being resurrected. The game completely abandoned the level-based nature of classic Castlevania games and instead gave players a more open castle to explore, in which the entire game takes place. It's exactly the same as Metroid. You explore, find new abilities, and they let you unlock new paths throughout the castle. Thus, players started calling it Metroidvania. Symphony of the Night adds to the formula as well, with a leveling system where you gain experience to increase Alucard's health and magic. You can equip him with many different weapons, bits of armor, and can cast spells. These RPG elements mean that the game is much easier to play for newcomers and adds a new draw to the experience rather than just a challenge of getting through stages. Symphony of the Night didn't sell well at launch, which seems crazy now, but it gained many fans over the years and now it's considered one of the best games of all time. From this point on, every new Castlevania game except for remakes would be in the Metroidvania style, but I don't think they ever quite reached the heights of Symphony of the Night, personally in my opinion, and so my recommendation would be to start here. This is where most new players should start their Castlevania journey. Now, as for why Symphony of the Night comes first on the title of the collection instead of Rondo of Blood, well, it's just the most well-known game, the most critically lauded. So that's the one they wanted to advertise first and foremost. Now, before we carry on to the next collection, I want to talk about a game that's on the Game Boy app of Nintendo Switch Online. If you have an NSO membership, you can play this at no extra cost. Castlevania Legends, which came out in 1997, the same year as Symphony of the Night. Originally meant as a new origin story for the series, Legends is now non-canon in favour of a later PS2 title, Lament of Innocence. But Legends has the honour of letting you play as the only female Belmont in the franchise, Sonia. Thing is, I just said every game after Symphony will be Metroidvania in style, but Legends is in the classic style. It's the one exception. You go through stage to stage, whipping enemies like always. This time, however, you gain new abilities upon defeating bosses, which you can then use like sub-weapons. It's an interesting idea, a little bit like Mega Man, but I don't think the game is quite as fun to play as Belmont's Revenge for the same handheld. Also, it's really hard to cling onto ropes for some reason. Like, really hard. But it's a cool bit of Castlevania history. Okay, now that's done, we can look at the next big collection that came out on every modern platform. Castlevania Advance Collection. This one is great. You've got 3 games here from the Game Boy Advance, in addition to one from the SNES that was left out of the Anniversary Collection for some reason. Let's start with that first before we move on to the others. Castlevania Dracula X came out in 1995, 2 years after Rondo of Blood, and is effectively a reimagining of that game. I said that Rondo never received an English localization until many years later, and that is true, from a certain point of view. While Dracula X is based on Rondo of Blood, it has completely new levels and can be considered its own game. The SNES was not as powerful as the PC Engine, so there are many cutbacks to the visuals and soundtrack. It's also hard as heck, one of the hardest in the series I would say. It's cool to play and experience another bit of Castlevania history, but Rondo of Blood is superior in just about every way. The true gems of the Advanced Collection are the GBA games. All of these are in the Metroidvania style, with exploration and discovery key aspects of the gameplay. They also have a greater focus on storytelling, with more dialogue sequences than ever before. Does it get in the way of the gameplay? Maybe, but it does give them a bit more of a narrative push, which I always appreciate. Now, the first of these is Castlevania Circle of the Moon, released in 2001. It does involve exploration of course, but it retains a bit of the classic difficulty as well, with the whip being your only main weapon, and knockback being quite prominent. I haven't played much of it myself, but I know that the story is considered non-canon to the main series, if you care about that sort of thing. You play as Nathan Graves, and yes, you're going up against old Drac himself. Again. There's a unique magic system called the DSS, which you get by acquiring various cards along the way, and that lets you combine different types of magic with different effects. Cool idea. There's leveling up just like Symphony of the Night, and from what I've played, the music is great, as per usual. Next up is Castlevania Harmony of Dissonance, released in 2002, which brings us back to controlling a Belmont. This time it's juiced, grandson of Simon. He's gone to a castle to rescue his friend, but surprise surprise, it turns out to be Dracula's castle. Now, I've completed this one 100%. Your primary weapon is the famed vampire killer whip, but you do also get sub-weapons. However, you can also find elemental spellbooks around the castle that allow Juice to perform cool tricks with his sub-weapons, like sending massive shards of ice at enemies. It's awesome. It's easier than Circle of the Moon, I would say, and feels a bit closer to Symphony of the Night in style. There's just one problem I have with the game, and that is its music. It's one of the only games in the series that makes me cringe sometimes when I hear the soundtrack. I don't know why. I think for some reason it sounds like a beta version. Others like it, but I'm not such a fan. Okay, well maybe there is one track I really like, but it's a remix of another track. Finally, we have Castlevania Aria of Sorrow, released in 2003. This is the best in the collection according to many fans. From what I've played, I agree with them. This takes place in the near future after Dracula has been completely destroyed. So who is the enemy? Well, you have to play it to find out. In Aria of Sorrow you can find a bunch of different weapons throughout the castle, much like Symphony of the Night. There's a lot of flexibility here, and that's heightened by the new soul system, which lets the main protagonist, Soma, absorb the souls of defeated creatures and use them for himself. There are souls for direct attacks, souls for defense, and souls for passive effects, like increasing attack damage while poisoned. It's a great system and one of the main reasons people love this game so much. I'd really love to tell you about one other mode you can unlock here that's totally badass, but I won't. You can discover that for yourself. Honestly, I think any of the games in this collection would be a great place to start, but the best one is Aria of Sorrow. The soul system is fantastic. However, if you want to experience a bit of classic Belmont whipping goodness in a Symphony of the Night inspired package, Harmony of Dissonance is a great choice too. If you don't have access to Symphony of the Night on the PS4 or PS5, the Castlevania Advanced Collection should be your first port of call if you don't want to deal with the more archaic gameplay in the Anniversary Collection. Last, but certainly not least, we have the Castlevania Dominus Collection. At the time of this video, it's the most recent of the bunch. It contains all the Nintendo DS games in the series, a whopping 3. Yeah, despite how long the DS lasted, we only got 3 Castlevania games to play on it. Oh well. Castlevania Dawn of Sorrow was the first, released in 2005. It's a direct sequel to Aria of Sorrow, so I won't spoil any of the story. All you've got to know is that it's another Aria of Sorrow, basically. It has the exact same gameplay with the same soul system and mechanics. It just looks and sounds better because it's on a more powerful handheld. You still get to use a bunch of different weapons, use various abilities, and kick the crap out of demons. And that secret mode I mentioned when talking about Aria of Sorrow, it's back here too. I'm still not going to tell you what it is, but yes, it remains just as kick-ass as before. Castlevania Portrait of Ruin is next on the list, which released in 2006. This time you play as 2 main characters, Jonathan Morris and Charlotte Orlin. Jonathan is your classic Castlevania protagonist with the ability to use the Vampire Killer Whip and a bunch of different main weapons. Charlotte, however, is a mage and she can conjure up various spells to kick the crap out of her enemies. You can either play as one at a time or play as one and have the other follow you as backup. The castle exploration is good, but a bit more limited thanks to the addition of portrait levels which transport the heroes to living painted worlds. They are quite linear, but still fun enough, I think. I particularly like one that's inspired by ancient Egypt. The music is fantastic in Portrait of Ruin, and the story seems to have more depth. The characters grow and learn truths about themselves and their vampire foes that will make you go, oh cool! It's linked to Castlevania Bloodlines as well, as you might be able to tell by the name Morris. And yes, there is an awesome bonus mode here as well. So good. Castlevania Order of Ecclesia was the last game released on DS all the way back in 2008. This game is liked by fans, but really deviated from the Metroidvania style. It still is one, no doubt, but you're no longer exploring a single seamless castle. Instead, there are different locales accessed from a world map. But what it lacks in seamlessness, it makes up for in visual variety. You play as Shanoa, a character with a backstory that's genuinely really interesting to explore. The new gameplay hook is being able to use glyphs. When an enemy is defeated, it has a chance to drop a glyph, which Shanoa can absorb and use much like Souls from the Sorrow games. All of Shanoa's weapons, including simple swords and daggers, are formed from glyphs. If that sounds a bit weird and maybe off-putting, don't worry, it's so much simpler to grasp when you're playing. The music is great, especially the main theme. Order of Ecclesia really tried to experiment with the Castlevania formula, and I think it did well. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough to justify continuing the series. By this point, there have been so many Castlevania games in the same style, and I think people were just getting a bit burnt out. But with the benefit of hindsight, all 3 DS games in this collection are brilliant fun. I recommend going with the Advanced Collection as your first port of call, but if you absolutely must play one of the most advanced games in this series before all others, start with Portrait of Ruin. Just don't play Dawn of Sorrow until you've played Aria of Sorrow because, you know, it's a sequel. But we're not finished! That's right, there's one more game in the Dominus Collection, and it was a complete surprise to everyone. Haunted Castle Revisited. The original Haunted Castle was an arcade game from 1988 based on the original Castlevania. I don't know much about it, to be honest, but I do know many people aren't the biggest fans. The remake though, people love it. Apparently it's improved every flaw from the original, and after playing a bit of it myself, it feels like a great classic Castlevania experience. Awesome replayable fun, and if you like arcade games, this will definitely scratch that itch. So yeah, this is where the story ends. Tragic, I know. Such a legendary series and full of some absolute bangers. Now, I know what some of you are saying. What about Castlevania Lords of Shadow? Well, that's a reboot, and honestly, I don't want to cover it in this video. Not because I don't like the games, I'm actually a big fan of them. I just don't think they fit in with the rest of the video. But if you want to play them, by all means, play them. You can get them on Steam, Xbox via backwards compatibility, and if they're still on PS Plus Premium, you can stream the PS3 versions on a PS4 or a PS5. Well, I hope this has helped you out. There are more games in this series, as I said at the beginning, but these are the ones that you can get readily on modern platforms. If it did help you decide, please give the video a like and maybe subscribe to the channel so you get notified of more content like this in the future. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.